What's up, squad? Welcome to the Adapt session where we have intrinsic convos on mindset, exercise, and life's ever-changing experiences with your hosts, Joe and
Mondo, what's up, everybody? How's it going? We have a guest today, and I know her pretty well, but Joe knows her much better. So, Joe, would you like to introduce our guest today?
I'd love to introduce our guest. Our guest is Jessica Wong. Jessica has been my client for quite some time, and she is a student at USC. She is studying to become a neuroscientist. So I'm just going to let Jessica introduce herself, tell you guys a little bit about herself and what she's doing.
All right, what's up, everyone? Jess here, 20 years old, based in Castro Valley, California, the East Bay area, of course. And as Joe mentioned, neuroscience candidate, trying to get my degrees going on, and exercise science, nutritional biology, neuroscience, all that stuff. They all intertwine, which is what this podcast episode is going to be all about.
I love
What
it.
happens when a kinesiologist and a neuroscience major walk into a room?
Magic.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
That's how you start a podcast too, baby. That's what happens. But I do
Man,
want
it
to ask you something
feels
as a
really good.
neuroscience major. I do want to ask you something before we get started.
Mhm.
Do you think that the brain is the most underused muscle in the body?
I would say we think it is, but metabolically and physiologically, it definitely is not, because it can literally like take up your brain can literally take up to 25 to 30% of the glucose calories that you're eating every single day, which is kind of crazy, right? If you're eating like your 1,000 calorie diet, right, 300 of that is going to your brain, or at least 2,500 of it, right? And that's not even at the like the rest of that. What is that? Since I don't really do math like Joey, the 1,000 minus no, that's 750, right? We still got that much left for just survival. And I think it's crazy how 25 to 30% of our glucose calories go to our brain.
I'm not gonna lie, I was actually just talking smack and trying to make fun of other people, but yes. I love that answer. That shows you just that shows you where we're headed. So let's start with the evolutionary standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the evolutionary standpoint is all about the set point theory that a lot of neuroscientists and nutritional biologists always talk about. And this is basically this thermostat that your body relies on for a weight that it is most comfortable in. And that's because of an evolutionary standpoint. And that all has to do with the root. And the root is the hypothalamus, which is this part of your brain that has a lot of neurocircuitry to tell you when you're hungry, when you're not hungry, when you're full, when you're craving this thing, X, Y, and Z, and all of these things. And it's different for everyone. And metabolically, what happens in the hypothalamus is what really helps determine the speed of weight loss, the speed of weight gain, and how we can adapt metabolically as we have changes in our lifestyle, when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to fitness, and when it comes to just like the stresses that we encounter every single day.
And Jess, I got a question for you concerning the hypothalamus, right? So one phrase that at least personally, and I'll explain why I feel gets thrown around too much, is it's different for everybody, right? So we all know everybody's an individual, everybody's body varies to some degree, but when we're talking about human evolution, how much does the hypothalamus actually vary individual per individual? Has that ever been studied before?
Yeah, so I can start off by giving a comparison, right? And we all heard of leaky gut syndrome. Leaky gut syndrome is basically like something's up with our microbiome, right? It's not happy. It's not having the healthy bacteria it needs in order to thrive, to become what helps your body function metabolically. And similar to that, right? There's something called the leaky brain, and the leaky brain. It is a very informal term, of course, but this is what breaks down the blood-brain barrier, which people call the BBB. And why do we even have this blood-brain barrier? Okay, we have this because our brain is so metabolically active. There's so many things happening. Like when you think a thought, when you're solving a problem, when you're speaking to an audience or whatever you're doing, right? There's so many toxins going in and out because just like our bodies, we have to excrete the toxins out, right? Our brains also have to do that. And because there's this blood-brain barrier, this selective wall that helps your brain only get the nutrients that it wants and to filter out the things that it doesn't need. So similar to that, right? Like leaky gut and then leaky brain. And I would say because like if I could eat a cookie and if Armando eats a cookie and if Joseph eats a cookie, I am 100% confident that whatever happens in our gut is completely different for the three of us. And as well as solving a problem, if there was like a specific math problem given to the three of us, what is happening metabolically in our brain is also completely different. And I would say it's because of two things, right? The first thing is gestation. What happens when you're in your mom's stomach, and the 4 months following that as well, because breast milk feeding is a huge thing when it comes to developing the gut microbiome. Okay, and like speaking about like gestation, breast milk feeding, and neuroscience. Like during the childhood phase of a child, when their brains are being formed, like we all know, like the brain loves fatty acids when it comes to omega-3s, and the brain is actually made up of a lot of saturated fat. And only when someone is a child at a very developmental stage of life, the saturated fat from the breast milk is what helps form the gray matter of the brain at a young age. But as we age, getting older, as 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, that ability to basically like quote unquote transform the saturated fat that we eat in our nutrition and into your brain becomes something that is like less and less possible, just because when we further ourselves in development, we no longer have that ability. And again, like this is an evolutionary standpoint, because back in the day, tens of thousands of years ago, our ancestors kind of lived a life of life and death and fight or flight, of course. And it was like the older you are as a human, the more tasks you do when it comes to the grunt work and basically the heavy lifting stuff. So our brains, right, the mechanisms that has adapted over the years, over the tens of thousands of years, all go back to the evolutionary days when it comes to how they live their lives back before we live in our social and a lot of media like society, you know.
Okay. So let me ask you this then. When it comes to our mother's breast milk, right? Us getting breastfed as babies, directly influencing how our hypothalamus develops, other than the saturated fat in the breast milk, what else affects the saturated fat in the breast milk, the development of that, and feeding us? For example, like type of nutrition our parents may have. Does that affect that to a degree, or is it just all genetic based?
I would say it's kind of like an inverse thing that's been happening in the research when it comes to gestation and breast milk feeding for the child and the mom. And a lot of autoimmune conditions often have the root from what had happened during the breastfeeding times. And there was a study done with folks with psoriasis and how their mothers were breastfeeding them in their first 4 months of being born. And because autoimmune conditions come with an overreactive immune system, right? And there's this huge part in our brain in the HPA axis where it connects our brain to our immune system. There's so much going on, and it seems like the brain has a relationship with like literally almost every single organ in our body. And I would say that it was like the moms who like quote unquote overfed the breast milk to their children, they found that they had a higher susceptibility to the autoimmune conditions such as psoriasis. But when I said how it works like an inverse way, it's just like because a mother's breast milk has so much saturated fat, that also helps a lot when the fat is oxidized and it becomes the gray matter of the brain during the developmental process.
I just wanted to say also, jumping back to your question, does what they like, their nutrition does it affect the breast milk or anything like that? I was gonna say another thing also that could happen. I mean, I think it's more when they're pregnant, but you can, like, it's kind of like the prenatal alcohol exposure. You can actually still expose them to that for even after, so while they're pregnant or even after they're born. So there's
Yeah.
so there kind of is a little bit of so what they do put in their body does kind of affect the baby, whether in the first couple months or the last couple months while they're in utero, or after when they're just born.
I would assume so, right? Because
Yeah.
literally what you eat becomes you. Whatever fuel you put into your body, or you know, garbage you put into your body, that's what you're going to use to try to um, metabolically for energy, to try to feed your organs, your cells, all that. So I would figure that whatever the mother is ingesting before she's pregnant, during pregnancy, and after is going to directly affect the type of breast milk that she has, and if it's nutritious for the child.
Yeah, because I agree with that too. So because I think that also plays a role in why the last 3 decades or so we've seen such a rise in younger people getting diabetes, and even children being born with diabetes. I think that plays a part in it.
I wouldn't doubt that. Now, going to the gray matter in the brain, I'm not familiar with that at all. Can you explain to us what gray matter in the brain, like what its purpose is, what it can actually do for us as human beings? What's the importance of it?
Yeah, so our brain is made up of gray matter and white matter. And you can think of gray matter as the most metabolically active brain tissues with the most active neural pathways. Okay, and the white matter, it's kind of like this like the fatty part of the brain that has a purpose of protecting the brain as an insulator. And the reason why the gray matter is so important is because it's not like the more gray matter you have, the more intelligent you are, the higher your IQ is. That's not it. It's the more active gray matter you have, with the more active neural pathways that will signal and activate several other things that are happening cognitively. That's what differs someone's IQ, if that is a good measure of intelligence.
Okay, so let me try to like understand this. Okay, so gray matter is the actual, like, how could I put it? The actual brain, in a sense. The white matter is more, like you said, the insulator, kind of like the way that we store body fat. People think body fat is terrible for you. Well, if you have excess, but if you, without any body fat, you cannot transfer magnetism, excuse me, through your body. So that's like transferring electromagnetism in the brain, right? The white matter. That's what it's for, in a sense.
Yeah. I would say it's the gray matter that's the one who is starving for glucose all the time. That's the one that's eating up the 25 to 30% of our glucose calories.
Okay. And that has to do with us thinking, like you said, solving problems. Okay.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
So you kind of went into the hypothalamus a little bit. You kind of mentioned it. Can we go? Let's discuss the importance of it, because I don't think people realize just how important the hypothalamus really is, and just how much of a say it is. And like, people think that when they get hungry, it's a random thing that just happens, but they don't realize that this gland is really what's behind it. So, do you mind going into the importance of the hypothalamus and what it really does?
Yeah. So so the hypothalamus, there's actually, like, I briefly mentioned this before, like the HPA, which is the thalamic pituitary axis. And basically this is like the highway, right? The highway between your brain and the gut, your brain and your thyroid, the brain and then the function of your immune system. And like in the topic about food and or nutrition and the hypothalamus, our brain has two types of hunger brains, as it makes sense to think of it like that. So the first one is basically the control center, the CEO, which is the hypothalamus. You know, it tells you when you're satiated, when you're hungry, when you're super full, and stuff like that, right? And it all goes back about ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin comes out or is secreted and released whenever we are anticipating a meal, like we're getting hungry, and leptin is secreted by our fat cells, and it tells us that we're satiated. And it's definitely logical to think, like, if someone has more fat cells, like, would that mean that they would have more leptin release, making them like satiated forever, right? And that's where leptin resistance comes along, and that's what hypothalamic inflammation is. And basically, as I said before, right, leptin's released by our fat cells, and when we're releasing so much, it's kind of like you lose sensitivity towards that effect, which is to satiate you. So that's why a lot of researchers have found that folks with a higher amount of fat cells are less satiated, are harder to get satiated because of the resistance that has been happening, so that the effect of leptin is not as strong as its default is, right? And basically, the second part of the brain, when it's not the CEO, this is our emotional brain, and this is called this part of the brain is called the emotional brain because it stores our memory cues to what we love to eat, and all the flavors, the five tastes as well. And this one is super important because sometimes we feel satiated, but we still have that emotional urge to eat more. And I would say this is all because of your cortical limbic system, which is the second brain, which is the emotional side of the brain, right? And like going back to the direction of the hypothalamic inflammation. So basically, this is all about like leptin resistance and how leptin is no longer having its potency to make us actually feel satiated. So someone doesn't know when they're actually full when they have eaten like numerically the amount of calories and the amount of macros and micros that are optimal for them anyway. And when we eat a little bit over that and over that and over that, that becomes stored as fat, of course, ultimately over this consistent pattern of not being able to feel satiated. And sometimes there are days when we feel very aggressive in our cravings, and that's when leptin processing goes down, and this is what causes long-term weight gain, as I talked about. And no one in the fitness industry specifically talks about how this hormonal response from our brain's hypothalamus is the reason why so many people like through so much caloric deficits, caloric surplus, and all these maintenance things, and tracking calories, tracking macros and micros in every single little detail. And why is someone's scale not moving? Why is their body composition still not moving? And yes, you know, the principle is there. The principle is calories in, calories out. But when you have the hypothalamic thalamic inflammation, what the calories in is not what the calories says on the nutritional facts, and calories out is not what you see on an estimated amount of calories burned for an activity anymore. Because when you are physiologically not aligned with what someone with a healthy metabolism is like you no longer know what calories are actually going in and what calories are actually going out, and that's something you cannot control because that's all up to our hormones. And our brain controls every single thing that our body does, and specifically the hypothalamus, and it could literally stop you from gaining weight as well as losing weight. Because again, like the set point theory is like, hey, I'm only comfortable at 170 pounds period, and at a 32% body fat, and I want this amount of water, and I feel safe because tens of thousands of years ago, you were below this, you were above this, and it meant that you're either trying to eat as much and hibernate, or you were starving because you're hiding from predators. And that's all I know because of neuroprogramming, and I gotta wait another 10,000 years. So right now, I'm gonna stick on this weight so you won't gain anymore and you won't lose any, no matter what you do. And I'm gonna tell all the things going on in the hypothalamus. It's like, hey, you know, let's stop secreting ghrelin, let's stop secreting leptin, depending on how safe we feel in this body right now. You know, and as your waistline increases, of course, the damage in your brain also increases because of the visceral fat releases these chemicals that cause that go through the HPA axis, right? The highway through the gut and the brain to damage some of the gray matter.
HP axis. Okay, that's the
Yeah.
highway between the gut and the brain.
And the gut and the thyroid, and the gut and the immune system.
So a couple of things
Uh-huh.
that you brought up right there. So to everybody here, especially to the clients of Joe and myself who have worked with us in the past, who are listening to this, when we say that you're basically tricking your body into losing weight, that's what she was just mentioning right now. Your body's comfortable in a specific weight. So if you're dropping pounds, your body's going to try to get back to that weight. That's the reason why you have to keep adjusting and you have to basically trick your body into losing that weight. Another one. So you mentioned how the hypothalamus is where we get the cravings from, where we get the food, the flavors that we love, etc., etc.
Mhm.
So what a lot of people don't know, and this is going to make sense to the clients that Joe and I have, is those foods that we love. Most of them are junk food. What people don't know is that a lot of the food industry, they have scientists that work directly to work with the type of flavors that are most, um, for lack of a better term, addictive, or the ones that we're most attracted to. So people wonder, like, that's why, like, even though McDonald's may be fried, and you may not be like, to a in a logical sense, you're like, I don't want to have that fried food. I don't want to have anything. But when you walk into the restaurant and you smell it, it brings back memories of euphoria, like when you were a kid, etc. Right? That's what they're trying to do. They want you to remember what it was like then. They want you to remember how much you liked it when you were growing up, and that's what they go for. So they attack those parts. I don't want to say attack, but they target those parts of your brain where you get that nostalgia, you get that sense of euphoria. So there's a lot of method to the madness when it comes to the food industry, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of people struggle with the clean eating and just getting away from unhealthy habits. It's like that's the reason why, like, people go like, man, why do I want Cheetos today? Why do I want Fritos or whatever?
Mhm.
That's why, because you just remember that flavor,
Mhm.
and it's remembered in your hypothalamus.
Mhm. Yes, yes, for sure,
Now,
for sure.
speaking of that pathway, right, between
Mhm.
your hypothalamus, right, in the
Mhm.
brain,
Mhm.
your thyroid,
Mhm.
and your gut. Okay,
Mhm. Mhm.
how can we rewire this pathway, or um, clean it up, clear it up, so
Mhm.
that people can learn to, obviously it's a learning thing because we're talking about the hypothalamus in the brain,
Mhm.
learn to disassociate those, their favorite flavors, if you will, that
Mhm.
give them cravings,
Mhm.
to disassociate that and start making healthier, better choices with their nutrition that can actually improve that pathway, improve their hypothalamus, their
Mhm.
thyroid, and their gut bacteria, right? So they don't have leaky gut.
Mhm.
And not just improve it, but make lasting change. What would you recommend, being, the student neuroscientist that you are?
Mhm. Yeah, I would say there there is a four-step framework when it comes to taking action to kind of recover the bit of the damage our gut has gone from our favorite junk foods, our favorite Fritos and Cheetos over the years that we've been consistently eating, and getting back into like and developing a gut that can transform how we live our lives metabolically. Okay, and I would say the first step is just like sit down and be like, oh shit, you know, I definitely know that what I've been consuming is definitely not what I want to do for a long, long time. And it's not a fight or flight thing. It's like, oh no, I gotta eat only salads for the rest of my life. It's not like that. It's more like, okay, the second step is I gotta find someone who can educate me about what nutrition actually means beyond macro, micro, and calorie counting, and what foods actually are best for my preferences as well as my health in terms of my brain, my gut, and how I can take it from there, right? And that step, I would say, because the internet has a lot of information, of course, and I would say only the peer-reviewed journals have the best information, but it's so easy to get lost in the sauce when it comes to what's there on the internet, when it comes to other people's opinions as well, and like their experiences from with their clients from a long time ago, and like all these things. But again, right, a metabolic fingerprint, it's different for every single person. And I would say that's the second part, where you hire a nutritional coach, you hire a dietitian, you hire someone who can actually sit you down and allow you to understand and the reasons why you need to improve your gut microbiome, so it can improve your brain functioning and the way you move and the way you live, and how that subsequently transfers to every single aspect of our lives, including relationships, school, work, other aspects of our health, and just trying to be the best person, right? Nobody listening on the podcast right now who's sitting on the edge of the seat would want to say like, oh, I am complacent, I don't want to do anything. Like, this is a podcast where we're going sometime in already, and if you stayed this long, I have no doubt that you're someone who wants to take action. And of course, there are several layers of our why, right? It's like, why should I clean up my gut microbiome and improve my cognitive functioning, right? And it's just like, I just want to be at least the 50th percentile of my class. Just like, why do you want to be at the 50th percentile, right? It's just like, I really want to graduate because this degree looks awesome. It's like, why do you want to graduate then, right? This is the last layer of why. It's like, okay, it sucks being the only person in my family who does not have a degree, and I want to have financial freedom in order to enhance the lives of my significant other, my children, and the generations beyond that, right? And there you got it. That's the third layer of why someone needs to like take action in order to improve themselves, right? And then there you go, like steps 2 out of 4, right? You are in contact with someone who is dedicated and will hold you accountable into a committed nutrition plan that includes your favorite fun foods, as well as including the other amazing foods that your gut microbiome is literally starving for, but it's been starving for so many years now that's basically like it's been muted. The screams and all the yelling, it's muted. Someone muted your gut when I wanted those greens and those healthy fats. I don't know who did it, but you can always take action today / right now, right? And
Joe's fault.
yeah, for sure. And the third step, right out of the 4th step, is just to continue being very mindful and experiment towards the foods that your coach or your dietitian has recommended you to do. It's like, oh, hey, you always had whey protein for 5, 6, 7 years, but you have this medical history of, I would say, like autoimmunity, and it's not best because there's a lot of stabilizers in whey protein that cause like the lady's gut microbiome to kind of act up. Maybe we should pause on that. It's like, hey, what kind of other lean protein source can I substitute for that whey protein powder then, right? And then you work on these things, like, hey, having this lean source of protein, I'm having tofu and some lentils and some awesome broccoli and cauliflower, like okay, like continue making different matches and experimenting of different things that are fully balanced meals of the awesome macros and micros going on and make you feel good. And I would say, like, it depends on how long it'll take to make you feel good. The first meal is not going to make you feel good. It's gonna be like different. Your brain's gonna be like, hey, you said we're having nachos tonight, period. Where are the nachos? What is this? It's just like, it's like, hey, calm down, brain, right? I'm just gonna enjoy this meal. This meal is awesome. It's giving me all the nutrients. Like, speak to your subconscious. Your subconscious is always listening. This is the meal that's going to get me to the next level of having a more fulfilled life. And you continue doing that day after day. And I would say, like, that's where accountability comes in, right? Having that consistency and having someone to keep you accountable every single day, day after day, week after week, and month after month. That goes to year after year, and basically it's your life, right? It's like that one quote from James Clear, the guy who wrote the book Atomic Habits, right? Show me your habits, I'll show you your life. And it's just like, these small habits that continue every single day that literally lead to the rest of your life is what creates our character. And routine is what satisfies our brain, because it's so automatic. It's like, hey, we know exactly what to do. I don't want to eat any more glucose. And I've already been super familiar with this pathway going on because of all these neurotransmitters being released. I'm following this, and you just sit back and relax. And one day, a lot of people always say this whenever they actually transform the nutrition that they have. It's like, wow, I don't want to eat that corn dog with nacho cheese on top and canned salsa anymore, because I feel so much better with different types of whole foods that make me feel grounded with myself and make me the most active and feel strong and cognitively at my best and over delivering my purpose in the world. It's like, wow, you know, it's like this huge transformation that's slowly going to get there. But I would say that's something that's the third step out of the four steps, right? It's basically to continue to build what makes you feel good, period. And even if it doesn't make you feel good in the first week or the first month, it's like you want it to make yourself feel good for sure. And that's why someone's staying for that long. And I would say that's where the fourth step comes after the months go in, right? That's the maintenance, right? Maintenance goals are super important. It's like, hey, you got to sit down with yourself. What I'm eating right now, can I eat these meals, my favorite combination of these meals that include both my fun foods that should never be eliminated, as well as these foods that make my gut really happy and my brain really happy? It's like, if you can say yes, this is a sustainable approach for the rest of your life to eat this way, then you just gotta keep maintaining this for the next few years and honestly, this is maybe one of the best forms of self-care that people often underlook, which is feeding your body with the fuel and nutrients that it needs in order to thrive, based on your metabolic fingerprint. This is the easiest way of self-care. There's no need to go all complicated with this, and nutrition does not have to be super complicated or scientific as well, right? The principle is definitely, that's where the science is, but taking the action and being consistent with it and feeling how you feel in the biofeedback and your performance in all areas of life and how it's changing you every single day, that's what we gotta want to keep noting. And that's the biggest form of self-care, because that exponentially just grows so much if you keep consistently doing it. So that's the 4-step framework to changing up our gut microbiome, which consequently helps us improve our brain and the rest of our health.
I love that. Okay.
I was gonna say a couple of things. One, that nacho thing made my stomach hurt. Two, um, it goes back to my mentor used to always say, be comfortable being uncomfortable. And he would talk about nutrition, he would talk about the set point theory, and he would talk about how it's natural for us to go back to our comfort zone. It's more just because we're more familiar with it. We want to be if we're familiar with it, that's what we tend to go back to. But he made such a good point where I thought I understood it back then, but in years since I've understood it more and more and more each day. You got to get out of your comfort zone, and it's easy to go to the comfort foods, to the junk foods, to the foods that are not so healthy because that's what you're familiar with. It's easy access and it's cheaper, right? But you had to. It's kind of like you also say, because the system eventually just cuts off those cravings for the healthy foods. Sometimes when you have that healthy food, it throws your system off.
Mm-hmm.
But then the same thing also happens once, for example, when we started going clean. I'll ask Joe in just a moment. But when I started eating cleaner and I started changing my nutrition, one of the things I started noticing is I wasn't craving the fatty foods or the fried foods like I used to.
Mm-hmm.
And it was to the point where I was tricked by the smell.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe will agree with me, and because we're gonna tell you because we went to a Warrior game. We told the story back then, but we'll tell you right now since I'm sure you haven't heard this one. We went to a Warrior game, and you know how outside of the arenas they do the bacon wrapped hot dog.
Mm-hmm.
Smells good, right?
Mm-hmm.
But just because it smells good doesn't mean it tastes good. And I can speak from experience with that. I remember we went to a game, and Joe was like, "It smells good, man, but I don't eat it." I didn't listen.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, it can't be that bad, right? And I ended up missing half the game because I was in the bathroom puking it up.
Mm-hmm.
And my body just it smelled good because to my hypothalamus it smelled good, and it was something that was familiar, but when my body was rejecting it.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be so it's one of those things where it's like you can't just listen to the cravings that your body also has, because sometimes your body just won't like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like when they say you listen to your brain versus your heart, etc.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like that.
There's some there's some key points you made that I want to go back on. So, one, when you're talking about changing the way that you eat, and you mentioned it's more than just calories in, calories out. If you're trying to lose weight or essentially drop your body fat, right? Which, as personal trainers, me and Armando try to get people to understand this. Don't worry so much about the scale, the number on the scale, I should say. Focus more on how you're feeling and how your body's changing, because the number on the scale doesn't tell you the whole story. There's a lot more going on physiologically. We're trying to focus more on dropping body fat, initially visceral body fat, right? Body fat internally around your organs that can cause more problems, rather than the fat you would see on the outside of your body that may change your shape or make you feel heavy. That's the one that we're not so focused on. That'll come in time, but more visceral body fat internally around your organs and building lean muscle, bone density, things like that. So when you talked about calories in, calories out, and then you talked about macro and micronutrients, I believe me and you had this conversation before where you asked me, well, if I take in too many calories, won't I gain weight? I said no. It's based on activity levels, and it also matters what type of calories they are. And we started getting into that, which was, well, if you can have foods that are higher in calories to a degree if you're eating a lot, but they have more nutritional value. They're denser in nutrition, right? Like we talked about the micronutrients, which most people don't worry about. A lot of people that are in the fitness street talk about macros: protein, fats, carbs. So are you suggesting, when changing the way that you're eating, to not count calories? Because that's what I would suggest, and just focus more on eating whole, nutritious foods.
Um, yes, for the long term, and if the goal is sustainability, right? And I would say, like, yes, not all calories were made equally, right? Let's say like a handful of nuts could have 250 calories, and so does a medium-sized Rice Krispie bar, right? There's a shitload of ingredients in that Rice Krispie bar that I literally have never even seen or heard of. I'm just gonna like leverage, if it says OSU, I'm gonna leverage that and think that it's gonna be some artificial sugar, right? And like physiologically, right? I say those nuts are whole foods. And when we eat the nuts, it's like, okay, our body's like, yay, we got 18 grams of healthy fats. Let's try to oxidize this so we can get some more metabolic functions going on for our brain as well. But just like when you eat that Rice Krispie bar of 250 calories, it's like, whoa, hold up, we have so many artificial sweeteners right now, and okay, gut, stop with the good bacteria that you've been working on right now. Stop with the brain function. We don't need that anymore. We need to figure out like what these ingredients actually are and how we can break them down. Stop everything. Nothing's important. Cognitive functioning, not important. How can we digest this, right? And then that's what it means when we always talk about how calories are not made equally. And I would say for someone who's brand new, I would find it helpful if they get familiar with what like if you could eye a portion of food and just know, like, hey, this is a difference between a 500 calorie meal and a 2,000 calorie meal, and being able to distinguish the substantial amount of calories versus not a lot, which is really hard to tell when you're volume eating, right? You can volume eat like a shitload of a huge salad with not a high calorie dressing, and that's way more food than like a chicken bake at Costco, which is almost 800 calories, right? You're looking at like 300 versus 800, and it's really, really hard to tell. It's like, hey, I'm eating a volume of food. This must mean that I'm eating a lot of calories. It's like, no, that's not true, right? And just, I would say, like, getting familiar with what micros and macros look like initially, to be able to eye it and intuitively understand, like, hey, I feel best when I eat this amount of food, and being able to track that data for yourself goes a long way for a lifetime thing to do with a relationship with food.
Good. Now, with that being said, we talked about not all calories are the same, right? So, for example, you take in some nutritionally dense food, like let's say a cup of brown rice, or probably half a cup of broccoli, and half a cup of some sort of lean protein, and a slice of avocado, right? May seem like a lot of calories, and you may think, wow, that's heavy, that's too much. But in reality, because those foods are so nutritionally dense, a lot of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, things that your body can use, it actually speeds up your metabolism, and you're able to convert that fuel, because it's whole foods, natural foods from the earth. You're able to convert that food into fuel a lot more efficiently and proficiently. And the longer you're able to eat this way and maintain this type of eating, the better functioning your metabolism gets to be. And that pathway that you were talking about between your gut microbiome being strong, your thyroid being strong, and your hypothalamus being strong, and that connection being strong, your metabolism is efficient. You're able to distribute this food into fuel, and those calories don't really matter because your body's more efficient at using that for fuel, especially again with the brain, right? 30%, you said, of the glucose that we ingest into our body gets used up by the brain when we're thinking, trying to solve problems, right? So the better you do this, the healthier it is for your body. Now, the second thing I wanted to ask you about was,
before you ask a question though, can you hold on? I just wanted to add to what you were saying, Joe, because you're thinking about the metabolism, how it helps, and it's going to make it easier when you have a whole foods to actually digest it, for your body to actually break it down, and it won't take such a toll on your kidneys to try to flush all of that processed sugar out. So you mentioned Rice Krispie treats. That's, imagine Twinkies. Twinkies have, I've done research on Twinkies, and for those who are interested, there's a book called Twinkie Deconstructed, and it talks about all of the chemicals that they put in there. You said that you weren't sure what chemicals they were. You didn't know what the hell those ingredients were. I can tell you what some of those ingredients are. Some of them is hyaline gas, and just and they bleach it with just all these toxins that they had to actually wear like hazmat suits to use. And that's in those types of foods. So those types of foods are harder for your body to actually digest, and they can actually mess with your that's the reason why it's so hard to process, and that's the reason why we're about to have a little bit of a poop talk right now. So this is literal shit talk that we're about to have. That's the reason why when you eat that type of foods, your body doesn't process it well, and you end up more likely to have diarrhea versus actually having a solid stool.
Yeah. This kind of goes back on the evolutionary standpoint as well, right? And the reason why our body loves to just digest those whole foods much more easily is because our ancestors tens of thousands of years ago, that's what they've been eating. They eat food that is planted from the ground. They're not just gonna be like pulling up and be like, hey, wait, I'm gonna eat my Twinkie real quick back in whatever BCE. And because like those neural pathways
probably made back then too.
Yeah, for sure. And they're just so used to eating like the legumes that are planted on the ground, like the land animals that they harvest at the farm, like all these things that are natural whole foods that we're accustomed to digest at default, right? And which makes it so much easier for our metabolism to be optimized.
Sorry to interrupt you, Joe. I just wanted to add on to what you were saying.
No, it's good. You guys bring some good information. Now, with both of you guys saying that, before I ask my next question, I'll bring something else up too. About whole foods. Nowadays, people are getting away from eating animals or animal byproducts. They're going vegetarian or vegan, completely taking meat out, which on one side, I understand, because the way that our agricultural industry, our farming industry raises these animals, they feed them basically what, let's say, a Twinkie would do to us. They're feeding these animals that kind of food to fat them up, to put more meat on the market. So that kind of meat, you definitely want to stay away from. That's not good for us. However, what you just mentioned, Jess, about back in the day, our ancestors, hunter-gatherers, right? Hunting, we ate meat. It was a very strong part of our diet and nutrition. Meat is actually plant-based, if you think about it, right? If you get it from the right sources. Animals graze on grass, bushes, whatever they're eating, and their digestive system is much different than ours. So that comparison is ridiculous when I hear vegetarians or vegans say that. Sorry, it's ridiculous. But anyways, when they're eating those types of plants, they're getting all the nutrients from those plants. Their digestive system is able to break it down, absorb that. And when we eat that animal and we get the meat is a condensed, concentrated form of the nutrients from those plants. So animals that are pasture raised, grass fed, or just wild animals, that's plant based also in a condensed, concentrated form. Excuse me.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Just to let that be known in case people didn't realize that.
I agree. I agree with you on the vegan vegetarian thing that you just said, bro. 100%.
Yeah, like I understand why people are doing it, especially if cruelty to animals. I respect that, but there's being so much things pushed out there in the media that's making meat look bad. We've always eaten meat. We're hunter gatherers, hunters first. But anyways, next question. I just have to make sure I say that so people understand. You get the right meat is actually plant based. So, my next question was on our metabolic fingerprint, which each person is different in their own right. Would you suggest that if people really want to make a change, if they've been having a difficult time losing weight, dropping body fat, building lean muscle, just getting healthy, right? Would you recommend that they get their vitals checked, like get their blood drawn, saliva, urine sample, and they actually get checked out for how their metabolic processes actually function?
I would say that's a good idea for the data to be in, and it would be super helpful if someone who is really familiar with all those physiological biomarkers to analyze, like, hey, with this medical history and with this that we found in your stool and your urine and in your blood work, you are best for like X, Y, and Z for this type of fuel and nutrition. And I think it's super important when you have that help, as well as just having like documentation, which brings some sort of satisfaction, comfort, and safety as well. It's like, hey, like we trust the scientific community to have brought me these medical results, and I can now leverage this as a way to kind of like quote unquote biohack my life to see what's best for my body, what's best for my brain, what's best for my gut microbiome, right? All these things that are influencing our endocrine system and our hormones. And when we have that data, it's like, we know exactly how we can design our game plan, and all that's left is to actually execute, because the results are in front of you. And I think that would bring a lot of comfort, safety, as well as just like direction as well.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I've recommended that to a couple of my clients, which they've done, and they've gotten great results from that. But those were like more extreme conditions. They were just having a really rough time. So I told them, go to your doctor, your physician, nearest hospital, and what you do is you go in fasted. Okay, you tell them you want to get your metabolism checked, and you want to get everything drawn, right? Urine, saliva, blood work. So they do that. They check how you process things. You kind of have to stay the night there, so it's a little bit intense. But for anybody who's really having difficulties, that's the best way to go. And they will tell you how your body processes things: protein, carbs, fats. What fuel is better for you, the carbs or the fats? How much protein you should actually be having on a daily basis, depending on what your goals are, your activity levels. And then they go into what micronutrients, those are vitamins, like vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C, all that good stuff. They go into the vitamins that you are deficient in, and they let you know that you need to eat more foods that have these vitamins. And you need to make up a part of your nutrition plan. So for those of you out there who are really struggling with that, you should really get that done. It's really good thing. That's how you're actually gonna know. But for most people, if you just clean up your eating, okay, and when we say clean, wholesome, natural foods, your metabolism will change. You'll get a lot better.
Yeah, for sure. It's just taking out the guesswork in order to actually be the most efficient in this transformation journey in a way.
No, definitely. Now, that's a lot of information we went through.
It is, man. Just kind of tells you just how important metabolism is, man. Because if it malfunctions, that leaves us vulnerable to illness and diseases, doesn't it?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, let's get into that next. I remember earlier you were saying that if our metabolism malfunctions, like Armando mentioned, and that pathway is messed up, hypothalamus, thyroid, and you got leaky gut, that you could start being more susceptible to certain illnesses and diseases. Which ones are those, and how does that happen?
Yeah, so a lot of the metabolic diseases, such as obesity, such as cardiovascular disease, and most importantly, when it comes to the brain, the neurological diseases as well, and that can go from dementia, Alzheimer's disease, mental health conditions such as depression and anxiety, because there are definitely foods that are going to exacerbate your depression, your anxiety, and there are foods that will alleviate as well, for sure, 100%. Like, for example, like Prozac, right? That is a SSRI. It's basically like the pill that folks with clinical depression take, that is prescribed to them from their psychiatrist. And basically, what happens with the SSRIs, it all happens in the gut. Actually, serotonin is generated in our guts. Okay, and right, that HPA axis, that highway that goes from our gut to our brain, it's so important because as I mentioned earlier, it's just like as our waistline increases, our visceral fat also increases, which increases the inflammation that's happening in our gut, and subsequently, whatever happens in our gut, it happens to our brain as well, because of the HPA axis. This is open highway going on, and our brain also gets the inflammation, right? I talked about the hypothalamic inflammation when it comes to like the leptin resistance as well. Like someone doesn't know when they're full anymore, and I would say just because a lot of like the added sugars, like I think Americans, it's like almost on average like 100 something pounds per year that Americans are eating for added sugars. And this doesn't even count like the natural sugars that are occur in fruit and veggies. This is like the stuff that it's like the actual sugar that folks like like put that 1 cup of sugar into that cookie recipe. Like that's what they call the added sugar, right? And basically, this goes into the topic of type 3 diabetes, right? Alzheimer's disease. And most people don't really associate like Alzheimer's disease when it comes to like glucose metabolism. And glucose metabolism, again, right, it's all about your metabolic fingerprint. And basically, why a lot of neuroscientists and clinical physicians are calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes, because there is a malfunction in glucose metabolism in the brain. So when we think of Alzheimer's disease, we're going to think of forgetfulness, lack of memory, poor cognitive function, all these things. Yes, these are all true, right? But what actually happens molecularly and physiologically when it comes to those conditions such as dementia, right? And I talked about this like earlier on, right? Our blood-brain barrier. This is this huge barrier that can be breaking down, of course, with a lot of bad toxins and intrusions coming in. But this is with this blood-brain barrier. This helps kind of like it acts as a filter for what can go in and what can go out, right? And molecularly, when it comes to Alzheimer's disease, amyloid beta plaque. You can think of like the plaque like our teeth, like in our teeth, when it comes to like these basically like kind of toxins that are ruining our tooth health. And this is similar for our brain health. And I would say this is super important, the amyloid beta plaque. You'll always hear this in anything about Alzheimer's disease when it comes to molecular parts of this. And basically, at one point, I had this huge project about that. Actually, it was like 450 hours in one summer where I really researched about Alzheimer's disease in the lab, which was honestly a really amazing experience. And that's why I'm really into neuroscience, as well as this topic, type 3 diabetes in specific, right? And amyloid beta plaque is literally like the toxin that is overly accumulated. We all have amyloid beta plaque, but because if we have an optimal blood-brain barrier going on, we can get the stuff in and out like easy, clean, or good. But when it comes to like, okay, no, something's happening with our leaky brain, our blood-brain barrier, something's going on. We're accumulating too much amyloid beta plaque, and no one's kind of taking the toxins out, right? And that builds and that builds and that builds. And when that happens, when there's amyloid beta and plaque around surrounding the brain, especially the gray area and the gray matter, the metabolically active tissues in your neurons no longer act the way that they do. And eventually they're like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but for some reason I can't eat the glucose that you've given me, and I don't know what's up, so I'm gonna pause myself for a long time and just kind of vibe out with the amyloid beta plaque, because they seem safe. They kind of remind me of white matter, and I'm gonna just chill here and I'm gonna be inactive. I'm gonna pause for a bit. Okay, I don't know when I'm going back on. And then that's when the cognitive dysfunctional activities go on. And it's just like, your brain can no longer metabolize that glucose that was given. And right, we talked about 25 to 30% of the glucose that we eat is all for our brain. How come now we're not eating as much? And that's because of type 3 diabetes, right? And diabetes, again, right, like briefly, we have resistance against sugar and insulin.
And I totally agree with the fact that Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes. I agree 100%. I remember hearing about that from my mentor a couple of years ago, and how he mentioned that, and everybody was like, "What? How?" And then he broke it down, and I completely agree with that. That's 1.2. You talk about the amyloid beta plaque.
Mm-hmm.
We all have it, and that's some of that stuff on your teeth. And that's and one of the things that we also learned is that like your that plaque, people wonder why, like there's a correlation with if you have bad heart health, shows up in your teeth.
Oh, right.
So that's one of the ways too, is that you get like your teeth are actually correlated with it. So you get a lot of plaque on your teeth. What's that gonna do? It's gonna start affecting your heart eventually, right? So it's amazing how that little plaque, that that quote unquote little plaque, is actually so harmful, and it can actually, and we don't pay attention to it as much as we should.
Yeah, for sure. It's like the atherosclerosis plaque as well, right? We all hear about that.
It's amazing. Like you guys, there's so much that we overlook when it comes to everyday things. Like we just see like, oh, it's just a little piece of stuff on our teeth. No, it's that there's a reason why, like when you see people with heart health and you see their teeth look like so brown. They're like, it turns disgustingly yellow or brown. It's all correlated. So you see like she's telling us that majority of the glucose that we absorb is actually in the brain. So I mean, it all works together, you guys, and there's so much that we're learning, and the body, we don't realize just how hard it works to keep balanced. And we're gonna get to that in a little bit, but can you break down what cytokines are?
Yeah.
Get there?
Yes. So you can think of cytokines as inflammation markers, right? And inflammation, when it comes like neural inflammation, that's when our blood-brain barrier is kind of not functioning at its best, and there's toxins coming in and out, and then cytokines is like, hey, inflammation is happening, and whatever inflammation happens, I'm going to be released in large amounts. And basically, it's like it's a like in a nutritional standpoint, antioxidants, right? They're the ones that fight against those cytokines. And some examples of antioxidants is berries, green tea, and one more is yes, and lemons, right? All these things are like, hey, we're gonna fight against these cytokines that are happening. And when you hear like lemons, for example, like vitamin C and all these things, like why does that help with immunity, right? Because cytokines are basically like a huge part of the immune system. The more we have, the more vulnerable we are to sickness, to disease, and to like basically death. Okay, and cytokines are kind of like this is a huge example to a huge comparison, and it's not like something that's directly parallel. It's like in cancer, there are tumor cells that grow rampantly around the body. And similarly, cytokines will exponentiate when they have more of that inflammation, more. And the higher the cytokines you have, that's what stores the abdominal fat when it comes to weight loss as well. And right, when it comes back to the type 3 diabetes, we can't break down those sugars that we've had, and because there's way too much sugar going on that we can't break down. So it's because of these cytokines. It's like, hey, I love amyloid plaque because I am a cytokine. I love inflammation. Let's keep it here. Let's keep it here. Let's not break down sugar. And basically you can think of cytokines as this huge part when it comes to like regulating our immune system, when it comes to fighting against illness, disease, and death, and just kind of basically like maintain homeostasis in general.
What do you think?
That was the point that I was referring to earlier, but I was gonna keep that as a surprise later on. Sorry, Joe, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. You're good. I was gonna say, what do you think about the keto diet helping metabolism? And there's been a lot of research done on the keto diet to help with Alzheimer's and dementia and any other type of illness or disease in the brain. What do you think about that? Have you learned anything about that?
Yeah, I would say that's based on metabolic fingerprint, and as well as past medical and genetic history, of course. Because again, back to the example about psoriasis, right? These patients with psoriasis are undergoing this autoimmune condition where they have trouble oxidizing these healthy fats, and as a result, basically the cells that are hungry for those healthy fats are not being fed with that, and that's what causes just the high activity of psoriasis when it comes to these breakouts, right? And I would say definitely a keto diet emphasizes on healthy polyunsaturated fats, which is super helpful for cognitive functioning, and your brain loves that stuff so much. And there's this huge misconception that a lot of people have, that like fat will make you fat, right? And every single type of fat has a different role that plays in your body and your brain and your gut, of course. And I would say like a ketogenic diet, because if it is a whole foods based like ketogenic diet where all these are like just ingredients that like we know the name of, it's not like a bunch of other stabilizers and a bunch of other like really questionable things to do just because it's keto. Like, no, that's not it, right? It's where these healthy fats are from, and whether or not we are at a metabolically healthy state to oxidize these fats as well. And yeah, it's just I think Joe mentioned this like a long time ago, but when we are burning fat, when it comes to like fat oxidation in exercise science, it's different from the Krebs cycle. Krebs cycle is all about protein synthesis and carbohydrate breakdown, right? But for fat oxidation, it's a completely different thing where CO2, which is your breath, is one of the major products of this biochemical process.
Okay. So anybody out there thinking about going keto to lose weight, that could possibly be the thing to help you, or quite possibly it could not. Depends. Got to check your individual biomarkers, right?
For sure. Sure.
Now, let's get into vasoconstriction, your blood pressure. How would having a, let's say, not so good nutrition diet, if you will, versus having a good one, how would that affect that?
Yeah. So vasoconstriction. Yeah, vasoconstriction, right? When we think of that, we got to think of when you got this cuff going on in your upper bicep, and someone's taking your blood pressure. That's what vasoconstriction, vasodilation is all about. And I think in several of the movies and TV shows that I watch, it's like the folks who have that heart attack are the ones that are at like, they have some profile of high cholesterol and a high fat nutrition, like bad fats, of course, bad saturated fats. I wouldn't say bad. I would just say not the most metabolically useful. They usually have those heart attacks because someone has like a high cholesterol history, and they went to KFC. They got the 20-piece for themselves, and then all of a sudden they got a heart attack, right? And that has a lot to, yeah, for sure. I don't know any of you guys are would be one of those people, but we all have our story in a way.
I go to Popeyes.
Oh yeah, then it's Popeyes 20-piece. My bad. And basically
Cajun fries.
yeah, So I guess this is kind of like a side thing. I worked in the food industry when I was 16, and I saw that they never cleaned out the oils when it comes to frying the food. And I would say it takes a lot of money to constantly restock and stock the oils when it comes to deep frying. And I think a lot of people who are unfamiliar with this can be really surprised, like, wow, this restaurant doesn't clean out their oil and they're reusing the same oil. Because all you do is just you throw in whatever you're trying to deep fry, you put it in the mix and you throw it in that little thing and you take it out. That's all. You don't need to like change the oil in a way. And I think there's a lot of conflict when it comes to that and people who actually want to go plant-based at restaurants, because okay, cool, you're going to order like a vegetable tempura, right? But then the oil that it was kind of made with it had also dipped a lot of like animal products as well as other things that someone may be allergic to, which I always saw as a big concern. But it wasn't my place when I was 16 to say anything. But back to the vasoconstriction thing, right?
Before that, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys are wondering why all your food tastes the same every time you go to the restaurant, that is why. You're welcome.
Yeah.
You know what? Not to interrupt, but I think that depends on what restaurant you go to. Specifically, I don't mean like chain, because I actually worked in the fast food industry too when I was a teenager. And I actually worked at KFC, so it's funny that you brought that up.
Tell her your story, Jojo.
And at KFC, I would actually change the oil every shift, or sometimes before. Yeah, depending on how many customers we had. When the oil started to get too dark, so it means it's dirty basically, I had to change out the oil before I put in the next batch of chicken. So I guess it just depends on where you go.
It's
for
funny.
Sure.
I look at Joe now and I'm like, man, I can't believe this is the same dude I grew up with. Like right now, you wouldn't catch him dead over in KFC, but at one point when he was working at KFC, he would come home. He would be like, "Hey, check it out, Brody. I got us some fucking." He'd come home with a bucket of chicken on one hand, and the other hand he'd have flaming hot Cheetos with cream cheese.
Oh wow.
She knows about that.
Good times, man.
Wow.
Good times back when we could actually handle that. Now I think that'll be a violent death for both of us. But anyways,
but sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, finish what you were
saying.
Vasoconstriction.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Vasoconstriction, vasodilation, basically the pressure that is within our arteries, veins, arterioles, venules, all these things, and how much pressure they are undergoing to kind of send blood to the heart, send oxygen to the heart that subsequently goes to our brain, right? And constriction, that means there's a lot of pressure, right? We have a certain diameter. It's like a tube, basically. Our veins, our arteries, all those things in the AV stuff going on, right? They have a certain diameter, and the more narrow they are, because of plaque, of course. More narrow they are, the slower the rate of sending blood to the brain, the heart, to the oxygen, to the heart, to the brain, all these things, the slower and slower. And also the volume of the oxygen, the volume of the blood is also decreased as well. And that's why like vasoconstriction is just like, okay, we're limited to the amount of volume and the speed of which we can send both oxygen and blood to the brain, the heart. So it's just like, shoot, what happens when you're in a fight or flight mode, and then all of a sudden you need to like run away from the predator, because that's what happened 10,000 years ago, right? Like, I don't think our ancestors were ever had that conflict of vasoconstriction when it comes to nutrition, because they're eating from the ground, the legumes and the animals that they raise, all these things. That wasn't a big deal before the food industry, which is the biggest industry in the world, right? It's like 15 $15 trillion industry right now. And they're trying to maintain the status quo of like all these processed foods that are easily made, a small input to make it, but huge output when it comes to consumers buying it, right? And that's the status quo that's going on. And someone may either adhere to it and kind of like fall victim to having like vasoconstriction because of poor nutrition, or not, based on the nutritional choices that they make every single day.
So clean up your food, everybody. Eat more natural, organic, whole foods. Pay a little bit more now for it, but you will save your body and your health in the long run. So I guess that takes us to our next thing. I want to ask you, what is the boiling pot analogy?
Yeah. the boiling pot analogy is all about the gut microbiome. Um, so you could kind of think of it as like the water that you're drinking, right? And how someone absorbs water is kind of different for each and every person. That's why some folks kind of put a little salt in their water, or put the what is that thing that people add in like Gatorade and stuff? Oh, electrolytes, and they put in electrolytes and salt, because that helps their blood, their blood flow go with when the water is consumed, of course. And I would say, if your microbiome, has been, your gut microbiome has been really poor for the past few years, decades, or whatever, because of eating a lot of processed foods, like consistently, and that's a majority of the diet, like were processed foods. You can see it as like a boiling pot. Like the more water you're trying to drink for yourself, like your gut microbiome is trying to fight all the time, because there's always like an incoming influx of processed foods going on, trying to fight. And like it's basically like, you can imagine yourself like exercising, like doing something of a high rate of perceived exertion, and like a really intense activity, right? You're sweating and you're hot, and it's just like, we're trying to like slow down our heart rate, and trying to breathe as well, and that's what's going on in our gut as well, right? We're drinking all this water, like it's not really absorbing to your cells at all, because your gut is always trying to fight all these toxins already. It's like, how can it make space and have capacity to kind of just absorb this water, so that it could go to your cells, go to your muscles, go to your brain, and all of these things. And for the general metabolically healthy person, this isn't a problem, right? It's like the water they drink goes to their cells, goes to their brain. But that's all about the gut microbiome when it comes to the boiling pot analogy.
Oh, okay. Does that incorporate the electromagnetism that's going on in our body, and does that affect also our hormonal regulation?
Mm. Yeah, for sure, for sure. And when it comes to the electromagnetic part of our gut microbiome, that's all about the organic foods, right? A lot of folks who believe in the energy and in the spirituality, that the universe has some sort of energy, right? That's all about, like, people are trying to go into those alkaline diets, because alkaline diets basically, right, they have a higher pH because they are planted from the ground, they're more organic, and as a result, these folks who are going on these alkaline diets feel like they are much more grounded with the universe, which kind of makes sense, right? Because you're eating all these things that are planted from the ground, and all of a sudden the pH of your gut, and then your entire internal organs and all these things are a little bit more alkaline as well. And it's like attract likes, right? In the physics principle. And that's why folks feel more grounded to basically the universe when they're choosing more whole foods, and all of a sudden their gut microbiome is slowly improving, and slowly, like, the temperature that's going on when it comes to, like, the activity in their gut microbiome is decreasing, and when all those things kind of like get its new normal, right? That's when we start seeing like major changes in our metabolism.
So you mentioned two things,
Hmm.
alkaline diet
Hmm.
and then pH. So
Hmm.
why don't you tell everybody what pH actually is and how it
Hmm.
regulates the body, and then
Hmm.
what exactly is an alkaline diet?
Hmm. Yeah, so pH is basically the amount of hydrogen ions that are going on in some sort of fluid, right? When we talk about water, I don't know about today, because basically the water that comes down from a faucet has a lot of like trace trace toxins, all these things, of course. But like, if we talk about like general, just like lab made water, H2O, right? That has a pH of 7, that's neutral. And the pH scale is 0 to 14, 0 to 6.9, that's acidic, right? The lower it is, the more acidic it is. pH of 1, super acidic. pH of 6, not as acidic as the pH of 1. And when it comes to the rest of the 14, right? 7.1 to 14, that's alkaline, that's basic. And basically, an alkaline diet consists of a lot of organic foods that are planted from the ground, whole foods that are planted from the ground, things that are not made in a factory where stabilizers are put in to increase shelf life. There's not a shitload of ingredients, right? These are all things that are indicators of alkaline nutritional choices.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, so just
Mhm.
just eating healthier, whole foods, planted from the ground, like you said. So
Mhm.
in a sense, plant-based, right? Would meat still be considered alkaline if it comes from an animal that's pasture raised, grass fed, or like wild game?
Um, from its root, yes, because it's kind of like wild caught fish versus farm raised
Mhm.
fish, right? And
Yeah.
this leads me to my next question when it comes to that. It's a question for Joseph about alkaline water in his own nutrition and why he chooses to drink alkaline water.
Oh, that's okay. That's a good question. So I choose to drink alkaline water to help balance my body out, like you said.
Mhm,
There are some foods that I do eat that are more acidic. Like for example, I drink coffee. I like having a cup of coffee
mhm,
every day, and that's a lot more acidic. So
mhm,
essentially, I drink
mm,
pH water to balance that out, my alkalinity in my body. So I'm
mhm,
not too much of one or the other. You got to be balanced, right? This is what we talk about homeostasis, your body being balanced.
mhm,
Homeostasis also
Yeah.
has to do with how well you're sleeping.
mhm,
Are you exercising enough? And there are people who exercise too much,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
What does your stress levels look like,
mhm,
right? Are you stressing out too much? And if you are, how are you taking care of that stress?
mhm,
What are you doing to relieve that stress, right? Maybe
mhm,
reading, listening to music,
mhm,
exercising, meditation, or doing
mhm,
something fun, talking to your friends, talking to family, something to help you calm down, to alleviate. So just balance throughout your life
mhm,
is better because all those things cause acidity, which is
mhm,
inflammation in the body. So I drink alkaline water to help balance out my pH, to make
mhm.
me more balanced and healthier.
Yes, for sure, for sure. Thank you for
I
sharing.
appreciate you asking that. So
Just answer
now
this
we. Oh, there you go. Armando has his little alkaline water over there. Nice.
right here. Got
Um,
always restock on it.
nice. Yeah, you should try to drink it a couple times a week. You don't have to drink it too much. You could just drink purified water, but if you can get it in a couple times a week, that'd be great. Um,
Okay.
but usually getting it from your food is better. So when I get it from my water, it's just an addition. That's all,
Mhm.
like a little cherry on top.
Yep,
Um,
for sure.
now that we talked about making sure you get enough sleep and how that can
Mhm.
mess your body up as well, brings me to circadian rhythm, sleep patterns, and its effect on metabolism. What do we
Mhm.
know about that in the neuroscience field, Jess?
Yeah, yeah. So circadian rhythm, that's basically the 24-hour clock that's been going on. And kind of like kind of like a side note, right? Females have something called the what is it called? Infradian rhythm, and that's
Hmm.
based on the 28-day cycle when it comes to menstruation, right? And
Mm.
briefly, menstruation has its four phases: menstrual, follicular, ovulation, and the luteal phase. And women have this 28 day phase, which is really similar to circadian rhythm, but this is all about how their brain optimally functions as well. But back to the circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm, when we think of that, it's like we think of blue light, and when the sun hits our skin, and all of a sudden we're no longer producing melatonin, which is a sleep hormone, right? But so for the longest time, they thought it was neuroscientists thought that it was all about light entrainment, which is basically when light hits our retina and the receptors in our retina send directly to our occipital lobe, which tells us, and it goes to all the other pathways like, hey, we are in the light. That means that to stop producing melatonin, because tens of thousands of years ago, that's what happened. We lived in night and day because there were no plugins back in the day, right? You can't put in your smart lamp and produce like non-blue light. That did not happen. It just everything from the sun. And we are so familiar with how natural light hits our skin and we stop melatonin, right? So all for the longest time, neuroscientists thought, you know, if we put these mice in a room of light for 24 hours, they will not sleep. Okay, and they did this experiment where they put mice in a all dark room actually, and they're like, you know what, they're just gonna fall asleep for 24 hours because there's no light. And they monitored and observed these mice, and they found out that they they fell asleep during the times that they originally would if they were exposed to light and day. And these researchers were like, hey, this is kind of weird. Um, they actually fell asleep and they woke up when it was still dark. And this is where the molecular part comes on. And they saw that it was more about the DNA. And in the DNA, there is this CEO. The CEO called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is called the SCN of our brain, and this is in the hypothalamus. Again, hypothalamus, that's where all the physiological stuff happens: sleep, nutrition, um um everything, right? This is the part in our brain that dictates that. And basically in the SCN, it tells us when to release these two proteins. It's called the BMAL, and the PER gene. It's like, hey, someone is, because of their DNA and their molecular fingerprint, it's like, this person can fall asleep better like at 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. because genetically that's how they were programmed. But other people got asleep at 8 p.m., 9 p.m., again because of how their DNA has been structured. And this circadian rhythm is super important because the timing of your feeding and the timing of your exercise activities dictate circadian rhythm. Okay. And this is because our brain anticipates things from happening, right? I mentioned this a little while before. Your brain loves routine, and every time you see a pattern that is happening, your brain's like, hey, this is probably default, because this taking this as default was a really good assumption, because 100% of the time back in the day, 10,000 years ago, what I predicted as pattern was something that someone our ancestors did every single day, right? And when we're about to exercise, if you have a routine of the exercise in this part of the day, 11 a.m. every single time you do it, or you eat strictly at 6 a.m., you eat strictly at 3 p.m. and 9 p.m., your brain anticipates that, right? And again, that goes with the ghrelin and leptin. Hey, someone's he's gonna eat at 9 p.m. Okay, all right, leptin, back off. We're not going to feel satiated because they're going to eat. Let's get some more ghrelin and hunger hormone. Let's go, right? And this anticipation is what also regulates the circadian rhythm, because it's like, hey, I know that it takes you 2 to 3 hours to digest this, maybe like 2.66. So I'm not going to let you sleep, or I'm not going to let you exercise, or I'm not going to let you do anything at the best that you can do. Like, of course you can fall asleep, of course you can exercise, but will it be at the optimal performance of sleep, optimal performance of exercise? Probably not, because of this entrainment going on when it comes to the timing of our feeding and the exercise activities as well, when it comes to routinal stuff, because our primal instincts love routine and automation, which is why circadian rhythm is so important to regulate. And that's all because of just having consistent healthy habits that are helping you become the best physiological state that you can be in.
Oh, okay. So circadian rhythm has to do with our sleeping patterns and how well the quality of the sleep is, right? Would you suggest that people have a specific bedtime and a specific wake up time to get that good quality sleep?
I would say having a ballpark of that would definitely be helpful, right? And a lot of neuroscientists talk about social jet lag. Social jet lag is basically we get like shitty sleep Monday through Friday, but Saturday and Sunday we get like 8.5 plus. And I would say for sleep, you don't want to look at like a weekly average, because it's not very helpful. Because one day you can get 3 hours one day and then 10 hours other day. You don't even out as having like a weekly average of like 6.5. Like, that's not how it happened. I think sleep should be something that is tracked day to day, which is kind of different for calories and fitness, because in that world, just having like, you see the physiological change on a weekly basis and a monthly basis rather from day to day. But for sleep, you automatically know when you had a shitty night of sleep, when you had an awesome night of sleep, right? But you can't tell whether you just you had like a full like a full meal that will automatically make you gain weight. Like, that's different, right? And
Yeah.
I would say having a good ballpark for when to fall asleep and when to wake up would be best for getting aligned with with optimal functioning, optimal metabolism of basically your food intake, your exercise performance, and the results that come with those two as well.
Okay, great. And would you? Yeah, go ahead.
So, speaking from experience, because Jessica right now is going through the ride of college. Let me ask you something. Be honest with me. How many, even when campus was open, how many were you able to get 8 hours of sleep every night?
Not when campus was open, for sure, 0%.
There, so now, so she knows where I'm going with this. See, in college, I'll give you my example because I agree with her completely. If you want to have a consistent ballpark, you want to try to get as much, you want to get those as close to those 8 hours as you can. And I'll speak from my own experience. Did I experience a difference? Yes, because sometimes I would work out, like I'd always try to get my workout in, and I would get a workout in like around midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. And I would notice that they weren't the same. Like my body just was, because my body wasn't used to it. It was programmed to either early morning or early afternoon. And if I didn't do it at those times, I did feel a difference in the quality of the workout. And I did notice that when I did sleep, because in the weekends, like you talk about the social jet lag, right? Like in the middle of the week, sometimes I would come into work, go straight to, like, there were weekends when I would spend the night on campus, go to class in the morning, head over to work, come back to class at night. And I would do that on 3 or 4 hours of sleep. And then the next day I would be able to get those 8 hours of sleep and I was okay and I was fine. But your body just wants to, I completely agree with the patterns, like the sleep patterns. One of the things that I learned as well is that the hypothalamus, it controls it, and like in order for you to get a regular sleep pattern, you have to do it for at least 6 weeks in order for it to become an actual pattern, a sleep pattern. It takes a while to do it, but absolutely you want to have a ballpark and a consistent ballpark in terms of when you fall asleep, so your body can actually relax and you can actually get deep sleep. Because especially if you guys have Fitbits, I don't know if any of you have Fitbits, but if you have a Fitbit, it actually keeps track of your sleep. So you might feel like you're sleeping, but truth is you're not actually always getting deep sleep. So you really have to, if your mind is working, if it's distracted, then you're not going to get a good night's sleep, and you will notice the difference. You will notice the difference, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. That's where what neuroplasticity is all about. Being able to change the original sleep patterns that you originally had for so long a time, and with consistency. And your brain's like, hey, we're comfortable at 9 p.m. every single day, and we're slowly reprogram. We're getting different circuits. Let's not use the old ones anymore. They're not relevant. Let's create new ones, and that's what neuroplasticity is all about.
Yep. And we're happy to talk about that again. And and that's one of the things that I noticed. Like once I got out of college, like I would like that early morning, those late night hours. I was awake. I was ready. I was studying. And one of the things that would always happen was that I would get messed with some of my friends, and they would be like, "Man, you do not go to sleep at 3 a.m. You do not study that late." Yeah, dude. They would call me. I remember once they were, and it was just one of those things where I was in the sleep pattern for so long of falling asleep at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and it took me a while to actually break that pattern. I started working full time. It took me a while to do that because eventually I was gonna have to wake up around that time, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, just to get to work. So that was a rough patch. That was a rough time patch at one point.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think I ever slept over 8 hours in college, actually, just because my priorities weren't aligned with my values. And when that happens, you kind of have the whatever it takes to get your to-do list done, which is definitely good for the short term, but for long term, that's not the best approach for high performance.
It's not, and there's I've talked about it many times here on the podcast that when I was in college, for years there were times when I was walking around 2-3 straight days where I didn't sleep, or at the very max I had like 6 hours of sleep in those 3 days. and people either noticed it or they didn't, or they noticed it and they just didn't want to say anything. Um, but it was just something that you pick up. It's just it goes back to that accountability. How much do you really want it? How much do you really want to accomplish something? How much are you going to hold yourself responsible? And Joe can speak to this too, because when he started over at our gym, body mechanics, he was getting up at 3. He was commuting. And when I say 3, I don't mean 3 p.m. I'm talking 3 a.m. He was on the road at 3 a.m. commuting. He was leaving and he was getting home around 10 p.m. the previous night. So it all goes back to, so people go like, oh, why the hell would you do that to yourself? Well, it goes back to that accountability. It goes back to, how bad do you want something? How bad do you want to succeed? It's like, you're not going to get the fruits of your labor right away, but it just goes back to paying your dues and the accountability. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of accountability, Jess, what would you recommend for people trying to, create new patterns with their health, with their fitness, trying to adopt exercising on a regular basis, trying to change the way that they're eating because it may be difficult? What are some things you would suggest?
Um, I would say it definitely depends on how long someone's been doing that pattern, right? And what their personality is like when it comes to having a sense of urgency. And what distinguishes someone who is efficient and inefficient is the sense of urgency, you know. And when I talk about sense of urgency, that's where accountability plays into this. And I would say it depends on your personality of what type of accountability you need. Some folks, weekly check-ins, monthly check-ins is already sufficient for them, but other folks need daily check-ins, like times a day check-ins, and all these things to keep themselves into goals. And honestly, um, the more accountability that someone has, the greater the sense of urgency that they will develop when it comes to achieving that goal. And it's like the version of you right now and the version of you that you are always visualizing and dreaming about. The only difference is is just the experience and knowledge needed to fill in those gaps, and that is always fast forwarded by a help of a mentor, a coach, or someone who has the ability to step in and tell you like, hey, you can solve this puzzle by like sorting all the pieces, each of the 1,000 pieces, but there's a different way that has yielded awesome results, and here it is. And only someone who is above you in the level that you're working on right now can teach you how to get there. And I'll say in terms of changing patterns today, it's like finding a good friend or a family member to hold you accountable first, and see how you adapt to that. It's like, hey, some people, I know for someone, he posted in a group chat of what he's going to do, and that really helps him. But for me, if I do that, I would not follow through, right? And again, like, it depends on the type of person, and it's just like you slowly add the type of accountability that you're creating in your life, because there's 4 levels of accountability. First, you do with the personal accountability, someone who's on your level, right? Like, hey, hey friend, hey family member, keep me accountable on this. Hey, it's like, it's not really working, I'm still not kind of touching my goals after day, week after week, month after month, and I'm lacking in this aspect of life. That's when you go to professional accountability. It's like a coach or a teacher or a mentor. It's like, hey, you have to keep me accountable for this, because only through your guidance and your eyes do I feel more driven and more and having a higher sense of urgency to complete this goal. And if that's still not really happening, right, that goes with social accountability. It's like you post on your Instagram story like, hey, I'm going to do this by this o'clock. Anyone who anyone who calls me out for not doing it, I will do this consequence for you. And then if that's still not working out, and if you're still okay with paying the consequence, whatever you have to do for them, and that comes with public accountability. And it's like, this one's for students. It's like you go on your Canvas, you go on your Blackboard, you go on your Google Classroom, whatever it is, huge group chat for your class that includes like literally everyone, all of your friends, all of your classmates, your teachers, their TAs, and whoever else is affiliated. It's just, hey, I'm going to do this, and and I'm going to be showing my proof of completing the assignment in this chat. And that takes a lot of guts to do that, because it's kind of like being vulnerable. It's like, hey, this person actually can't can't get this done without showing this to this class. And that's completely fine. If that's what helps that person get to the next level, then they're still climbing the ladder one step higher than the person who all of a sudden feels insecure and their ego is attacked that they're doing something because maybe some part of them wishes they had that courage to have done that public accountability. And I would say, like, of course, like, having a consequence when it comes to not completing that goal is the absolutely most effective way to actually build a genuine sense of urgency, which will transfer to all aspects of life. And accountability is not a forever thing. Like, you do not need to leverage accountability for the rest of your life. If you're able to slowly develop a sense of urgency with leverage accountability over time, then all of a sudden, like, a sense of urgency is ingrained in you. That's something that you can develop all on your own, and you do not need that handhold, that guidance anymore. And the faster that you can get to that place of no longer needing it, all depends on how much action you take. And it goes a lot about integrity and what you want to do when nobody's watching, and what's best for you.
There we go. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I want to give this
like that
story because the truth is, like, so towards the end of my college career, I had to do a general ed class. I had to do chemistry, and and I remember there were a lot of younger kids in the class, so they were by your age, and they're just like, oh my god, this is so hard, this is so hard. I'm like, this class is easy. Just because I already been through the ringer, right? I'm on the verge of going on stage. And I'm just like, this is easy. They're all panicking because the majority of them haven't experienced finals yet. And they're like, oh my gosh, I haven't slept anyone knows how long. So we had to partner up and we had to do a group project. So I calmed them down. I'm like, okay, come with me, work with me. Okay. So I make this group Snapchat. And they didn't believe how dedicated I was. And I told them, you know what? You guys are going to hold me accountable. I'm going to send you guys a snap every night that I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them, I'm going to spend the weekend here. I'm going to be here on a Saturday. And I will send you guys a message every time I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't know what time. So I would send them messages. One day I could send them a message at 4:00 in the afternoon. The next night they would get one like around 2:00 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I was on campus. I was in the school library because the school library over at San Francisco State was open 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be in there studying, and I would also spend the night on the benches right outside.
Mm-hmm.
Right outside, like it's not literally outside, but it's outside of the main library.
Mm-hmm.
So I would send that to them, and they were completely shocked that they still think I'm insane, but they were also caught off guard because they were also they also were like, oh, that's crazy, that's respect, because he's literally about to walk the stage.
Mm-hmm.
The following semester, that was my last one. So when they saw me with my cap and gown, when they saw pictures of it, they were like, okay, that's what I want to do. And now one of those kids that I was mentoring, listen to me say kids like I'm 20, 30 years older than them. Now she's literally about to graduate this upcoming summer. And she says that she had moments where she panicked, but if it wasn't for me helping her out, that she wouldn't have gotten over that panic that she had that first semester. Because she came this close. And I'm holding my fingers really close together. She came that close to actually dropping out of college. So so it works. It works. And you don't know who's watching you while you're doing it.
Yeah.
Definitely. Since you guys are on the topic of accountability, I feel one of the things that really helped me start implementing nutrition was definitely personal for me. I always wanted to get better. I always wanted to be an athlete when I was younger. So looked at some of the diets or nutrition plans that my favorite athletes were eating. and how they were able to get so physically fit and athletic. So I kind of started trying to incorporate that. But as I became a trainer, what really held me accountable was, okay, if I'm going to be teaching my clients these things, I have to live it if I'm going to be preaching it. So that's what really helped me to continue and eat the way I was eating and start developing new habits. Because like Armando mentioned earlier, when I was younger,
Joe?
a lot of that, a lot of sweets, all that kind of stuff. So becoming a trainer really helped me to hold myself accountable for myself and for my clients. So that way I can actually live the lifestyle that I was trying to preach to them that they should start living to better their overall lives. So it works, definitely.
Okay.
You say something, Armando?
Yeah, we kind of lost you for a little bit, but then you came back. We lost you for a little while, and then you came back.
Okay, cool. Were you guys able to hear what I was saying?
At the end, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that goes for a lot of the careers in health and fitness, when it is an interpersonal career, when they are working with someone who wants to get to at least a similar type of health and lifestyle that you want. And yes, some days we may slip 1 or 2 days, but it's what happens like majority of the days that really count to our physique, right? Like it's kind of like the 80-20 principle as well, right? And I think it's awesome that you leverage the folks that you work with, and keep your physique and your nutrition and lifestyle in check as well.
No, definitely. I mean, if anything, my clients really motivate me because I see how hard everybody works. You know, they're trying to get healthy, they're trying to get fit, they're trying to get that physique, whatever it is. A lot of the times they're trying to relieve stress too from their chaotic jobs in their life. You know, families, kids. Like they got a lot of stuff going on, so it helps them in all aspects of their life. So when I see how hard they're working, like man, I got no excuses.
It gives you, it gives you a boost.
Yeah, I got to get on the ball, and I guess that's where it comes with that sense of community at the same time, and public, right? Because all my clients, they're public. They're gonna tell people to come train with me if I'm inspiring to them, if I help them. So it really helps me stay on my toes, and I leverage that from them to push forward. So yeah, absolutely.
And we can definitely speak as coaches too, because we're not gonna lie to you. Sometimes the hours can be rough, and sometimes we can be exhausted, right? But then we see you guys come up on the entrance, and then we just like it gives us like a second wind, and we're back. But we mentioned this a couple of times already, but let's really go into homeostasis and what it is, because people really don't realize just how hard the body works to maintain homeostasis. So Jessica, you mind explaining what homeostasis is?
Yeah, so homeostasis is basically your body fighting hard to make sure that the metabolic functions, the physiological responses, and basically also the biofeedback is all aligned to the default, which is genetically programmed to what your body needs in order to thrive in all ways possible. And
just a question on thriving genetically. When you say thriving genetically, are you talking about genetics as far as individuals and families, and like lineage, or you mean genetically as human beings overall?
I would say a mix of both, like depending on an ancestry and the default of how humans are programmed. And homeostasis is super important because like it's like your basal metabolic rate, whatever that is for that person, depending on their body composition and their medical history as well. It's like that's the amount of calories that it's going to take to basically survive. And that's like a lot of calories just to survive. And people often underlook that because we can't hear the organs working hard, or we can't feel like our muscles are pumping this amount of like lactic acid just to make us like like survive, and just being aligned with what our body needs is super important. That's where the biofeedback comes as well, like how we feel internally, and how our performance is affected in all areas of life.
And you know what else we can't feel? We can't feel our blood being balanced, because the blood has to be at a specific pH level. It has to be between 7.35 and 7.45. And if it's not in there, it gets too acidic, or it gets too basic for all the systems inside. So it has to be strictly in that range for all of the systems in the body, like the Krebs cycle, et cetera, to work. It works really hard just to maintain that balance. So it either works. So homeostasis is important because it's either maintaining homeostasis, or you try to get as close to it, and it works really hard to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know that the body works on 7-year cycles. So what that means is we all want to get results relatively quickly, right? And if you work out for 3-6 months at a time, you can get really good results as far as externally. But what we don't see happening is our physiology changing molecularly, cellularly. Things are adapting to the activity, to the food, to decompressing our body with stress, better aligning our body with exercises and corrective exercises. If you do that long enough, and again, body works in 7-year cycles. If you do that long enough, you can actually change molecularly, cellularly, and your body just completely transforms. Not just the way that you look, yes, that will come, but internally in the way everything functions. So if you're able to do this for 7-year periods and then continue for a next set, you're completely changing like your lineage to come. Your kids, grandkids, you can actually change in a sense your DNA and your genetics, which is pretty crazy. If anybody out there listening wants to really change their health and what's going on with their family, you got to be that change, and you got to start doing it. Unfortunately, it does take 7 years, but as soon as you adapt the patterns, like we were talking about, and if it's difficult, find some accountability, like Jess was talking about, like Armando was talking about, you can actually change your health for your future family, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. And the set point theory, actually, right? Like the set point that is basically the weight that our body is most comfortable with. That is also a 7-year cycle as well. But I think it's important to note that this 7-year, like quote unquote, reset is not really like a countdown timer thing to like 7 years. It's not like at the day right before the 7-year mark is you get like an amazing transformation. This doesn't go like that. It's more like the consistency that is built throughout the 7 years is going to help you get to the next level in the next set, so that you can maintain what you've already been working for, and also get to the next level there slowly. But then at that 7-year mark, it's like, okay, this is my new default. All of a sudden, things that I exercised with, the things that I ate, the time that I slept 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, it no longer kind of applies today, because all of a sudden it's like, yay, we have a new default. And I think a lot of people do get discouraged. It's like, wow, it's going to take 7 years of healthy eating, of consistent physical activity, and basically and consistent sleep time, right? Those are basically the 3 main things that do help us reset that circadian rhythm every 7 years. It's just like, wow, people are kind of discouraged by that. But I personally think it's a beautiful thing, because although it takes 7 years, right, that's basically your body saying like, hey, we are so comfortable in what you've been doing for the past 7 years, so I'm gonna keep it like this because I want you to survive and thrive in the way that you are right now, even though there is a future next level. But I'm gonna keep you right here because this has kept you safe yesterday, the month before, and the year before. And until I get more signals from you in this long-term period that you're okay with getting to a new default, then I'm gonna go from there. And it's basically like a survival mechanism, because your body just wants to survive. And if it was just that easy, if we just take a magic pill to get to the next physique, to get to the next nutritional habits, all of these things, like anyone would take it. But your body's like, no, I want to keep the programming, because again, like what happens in our gut, what happens in our brains, neural circuits, these things don't change overnight, right? One salad isn't going to fix your nutrition, and one Snickers bar isn't going to ruin your nutrition as well. Like it goes both ways, and it's all about long-term consistency and how we can actually maintain that when it comes to a comfortable point.
Yes, and I'm glad that you mentioned, the Snicker bar, as a reference
Mm-hmm.
to having some indulgence in your life. That's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
If you have something like that, it's not gonna ruin you. You're gonna be fine. You're gonna be more than fine. You're gonna be awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for
Now,
sure, for sure.
with
Fun
that,
foods, fun
yeah,
things. Yep. Mm-hmm.
definitely. Now, with that being said, unless you guys want to add anything else, I think this has been a great conversation on neuroscience and the gut microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
You guys want to add anything?
Impressive stuff, man. I'm actually really happy with how I'm actually really impressed with what we were able to discuss today. Um, we have we've been wanting to talk about this stuff for a while. We were wanting to get more scientific, and I think we got our wish.
Mm-hmm.
We try to
Yeah.
keep it. We try to keep the terms as simple as possible, just so we wouldn't, so you guys don't lose the interest. And I'm hoping that you guys take away a lot out of this conversation, that we start thinking about it. It leaves you thinking.
Mm-hmm. For sure, for sure. And one last note is just like, it's just like do not be an informational junkie, right? So it's like 2 hours of this podcast, and if you don't take any action at all from this podcast, you wasted 8 hours basically, because there's 2 hours from each of the three of us, and as well as your own, and you kind of waste 8 hours, which was is probably more than you slept the night before. And honestly, like, taking action is what is going to actually have behavior change going on. And like, you got to take action. And if you don't take action, you wasted 8 hours of time, which is kind of substantial, because you could have taken that 8 hours to change up your nutritional plan, get into some fitness program that will get you to the next level, right?
And it's all about,
Right.
and that's the thing that we've been promoting from the start since we started doing the show.
Mm-hmm.
Develop a new skill. Don't come out of this quarantine and out of this pandemic without something new to learn. And
Mm-hmm.
Jessica, I want to thank you for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
And how can where can we follow you? Where what are you? Do you want to share your info, or you are?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm active on Facebook and Instagram. Facebook, Jessica Wong. It's gonna be a group picture with like a beach background, and a couple of maybe like 9 Asian people, okay, of the age range of 20 to 23. All right, then that's when you know it's me. And Instagram is Push with Jess. And basically, if you got anything out of this, and you are willing to make your own action plan, right? Any of us here are super super willing to take a look at it, and hold you accountable for that, as well as a way to, like, you actually got started, right? Because information without implementation is absolutely meaningless. And you want to do yourself a favor, right? And that's the ultimate form of self-care, to get yourself to the next level that we all need.
Absolutely, you guys.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
Follow your boys on Adapt.Session on Instagram, and like us on Facebook. You guys take care. We're gonna see you next time, Jess. We're gonna have you again in the future.
All right, for sure, for sure.
You guys.
Later, squad.